Yeah, challenging, very challenging. We had a good old 25 knot wind blowing today, and it was a downwind upwind leg. And you'd expect the upwind leg to be hard work, and it was to some extent, but this cloud streaks were nicely lined up, so it was one of those days. Unfortunately, you could just run into wind. And I'm flying quite a nice glider, an Arcus, which is one of the new shrimp Earth gliders, which penetrates pretty well into wind, and we were able to run upwind pretty quickly and efficiently. Turned a couple of times up that leg, and then got around the upwind turn point eventually, quite low, which was really a lot of fun, because when you're near the upwind turn point, you don't want to be hanging about. You want to get round that turn point and go off downwind. And actually, as it worked out, because James is not quite as experienced as I am, I said, if it works by textbook, we'll go around that turn point at 1,000 feet, and then we'll scuttle downwind and hit 4 knots. And that is exactly what happened. So we were very lucky.
The weather didn't really look like it was on for any kind of a task with the strength of the wind that we had today. But the director made a good call, stuck to his convictions, and sent us off. Soaring conditions were pretty good actually, much better than I expected them to be locally to here when we launched. And I was getting 6 knot climbs to 4,000 feet, and everything was looking good. So I ambled around in the start sector, started to hear a few people setting off. There looked to be a great line. I went to the start line, mistimed the wind slightly, and drifted just a fraction too far ahead of the start line from where I wanted to be, and literally fell out the sky. I lost 400 feet in the space of one turn, and then so it meant that I couldn't really do a really good start at that point. And I then lost another 2,000 feet looking for another climb, and it took me another 25 minutes to climb back up to cloud base to be in a position to actually make a proper start. And it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because I had a brilliant first leg. Went way to the right of track, went over top, almost over the top of RAF Marham. I could see the coast, it was great. Glid into the first turning point and met up with quite a few of the gliders that had started 20 minutes ahead of me. So I was really pleased. I was at cloud base. Then we had to do the interwind leg, and it just took forever. And a lot of gliders I noticed went right of track, we went left of track, the idea being we would be more into wind, so that when we stopped to take thermals, we would drift back onto the track line. That was the theory we were trying to use, but it was quite time consuming, and we got very low at March. There's a prison at March, and we had a close inspection of that. We eventually climbed away from there, and had a close inspection of the brickworks at Peterborough. Got a great climb there eventually. It took me a long time to get into the core of the thermal. Met up with a few more gliders. Around the turn point at Oundle, we saw one glider in a field, and it turns out it was probably my syndicate partner in his glider, X-Ray Sierra. And then around the edge of Connington, we were sort of listening to their frequency just to see what was going on there, but there wasn't much. But we didn't have to go into their ATZ, but we came very close to it. And then over the top of Upward, and struggled round Ely. Got a little bit of a climb round Ely after being around the turning point, and then we jumped onto a fabulous street of thermals that led us all the way home, and finished with excess height and speed, which is always good.
It was horrible. Took off with my sweatshirt on, which I shouldn't have done because it was too hot, and then mincing around in the cloud base before the start with people in cloud and stuff, which was also horrible. Set off on track, got low going round that first turn. Was it docking, that's the one. Up, and then got back to King's Lynn. Then what happened? Oh yeah, got very low. I didn't know they had so many big cranes in the middle of King's Lynn. There's some docks there. At least I think it's King's Lynn. Is it King's Lynn?
That was King's Lynn.
It was King's Lynn. Yeah,
the big town just by the side of the wash.
And then just carried on. It was quite hard work really. But I guess you found it a bit easier.
Well, the story of my flight's rather different, really. I thought ideally for that we'd want to go 1 o'clock-ish, and we were starting to play start line games around about 1 o'clock, and I was in a nice position to start. Actually, I did go through the start line,
and it was a fantastic start. I started from way above cloud, and then I thought, no, it's too early, and came back and flew out to the west. Saw this lot all milling around together close to cloud base, and then flew out to the west a bit more, and it looked horrible, the weather coming, and I thought, don't be a fool, get going. The start time isn't going to be important, a few minutes either way. So I got going, and the initial run out on the first leg was pretty good. I got some good energy lines, and then I think the big difference was I got myself up reasonably high before docking, up to about 3,500 feet, which gave me a relatively high turn at the turning point there, the downwind turning point. Flew away to the west, back to the edge of the wash, where I picked up a little line that basically turned into a developing cloud streak that more or less took me all the way to the second turning point. So I was able to just keep going, running with just an occasional turn here and there to stay in touch with cloud base. And then arriving back close to Ely, it looked awful, absolutely awful. I wasn't quite high enough to final glide round Ely and come home, so I parked up there for 10 minutes or so while I waited for something to happen with the weather. And eventually, while I was climbing there at half a knot, I eventually saw what I thought was a little line with a possibility of getting into the finish. So then I turned Ely, came this way a little bit, climbed at a knot or so, but while I was doing that, the little line definitely formed, so I just trickled in from just below glide slope all the way in on a straight line.